All right. A very warm welcome to all present here, and thank you for finding time and joining us for our Architectural Design Lecture Series, a Studio Discourse 2021, Session 2. Like we all learned in Session 1 that about vernacular traditions. Now, I'm going to explain a bit about our semester's approach in this design studio. It is introduced to us students to the varied flavors of small towns and their architecture. In light of legitimate concern for widening the framework and scope of architectural inquiry, students are encouraged to connect their investigations to larger ideas and cultural themes in areas such as philosophy, art, literature, and popular culture. These queries may challenge us to the assumptions of the site, the conventions of architecture, and help in the reaffirmation of the situation of one's own beliefs. In addition to this central premise, we also explore other aspects such as reconstruction, urban context, functional framework, climatically relevant responsive designs, etc. These will also be addressed in our studio. So each studio we are also aiming in the studio at further developing understanding of need, pace, and context. These will be via analysis, mapping, theoretical readings, etc. So the idea of a studio is more to delve into the need of the project rather than the wish of the project. So without any further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to also welcome my fellow colleagues of second year at Sushant School of Art and Architecture, respected faculty, our studio director, Professor Amrita Madan, and the studio coordinator, Srijani Hazra. Now, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome our guest speaker for the session, Dr. D.P. Chandrasekhara and architect Chinthaka Wickramage. And our next speaker is architect Chinthaka Wickramage, who is currently the principal architect at Chinthaka Wickramage Associates, Nugegoda, Sri Lanka. After obtaining his Bachelor of Built Environment from the Faculty of Architecture University of Moratuwa, he worked as an apprentice under the Sri Lankan architect Anura Ratnavibhushana. He completed his postgraduate studies at the Bartlett School of Architecture and graduate studies Bartlett, London, obtaining his master's from the University College London, United Kingdom. After returning to Sri Lanka and working at a leading architectural firm, and then finally he set up his own practice in 2007. He believes Sri Lankan architecture to be a mixture of many styles and influences, being in the middle of the trading route between East and West for centuries, and draw inspiration from a traditional vernacular architecture and try to adapt it to the present day at the use of same time, not shutting down the international influences. What makes their work stand out is free thinking, yet functional conception of how buildings can work both inside and out. One of his very renowned projects include the Pagoda House, which was the first of its type which formally began to maximize the trades and materials of a local building industry. Another one, the Isana Beach House, is ideally situated for visitors who wish to base themselves on a beach and explore the southern region. The designs of this beach house drew inspiration from the vernacular buildings of the nearby small towns and villages as well as the local culture. For his amazing work, architect Chinthaka Wickramage has won international and local architectural awards including ARCA SIA Gold Medal for Social Responsible Architecture Awards 2013, for IFRCS Community Center for Tsunami Affected Community in 2007 of Thalala, and Jeffrey Bauer Awards Institution Category Award for Kethedi Vocational School, Jaffna in 2017. His work is published both locally and internationally, including Architectural Review Magazine, United Kingdom, and Architectural Asia Magazine, Malaysia. I welcome you, sir. Now I will turn over to architect Chinthaka Wickramage, who brings to us a deep understanding of Sri Lanka and architectural identity through his extensive professional work. Over to you, sir.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you, everyone can see my slide, I suppose?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so then without further ado, I will start. With our work on establishing a discourse on identity, evolving around heritage, style, sustainability, ecology, traditionality, and technology, we would like to share our practice experience and learnings with you students of architecture. It would really benefit all of you to understand Sri Lanka as a place with its respect for the ecology and the geography, its connection to nature, and deeply rooted sustainability, and its great penchant for simplicity and austerity. As the need for more sustainable architecture in Sri Lanka becomes increasingly explicit, we concentrate on analyzing the conditions of the site, the desires and requirements of the clients, and the functional program. Although well versed in historical design precedents, we are analytical about our relevance to
I'm
contemporary.
sorry, sir. Are you proceeding with the slides because they're not moving?
No, not yet. I have
All
started.
right, all right. I was just confirming, sir.
Although well versed in historical design precedents, we are analytical about our relevance to the contemporary circumstances. We are determined to avoid a tendency for architects to be indoctrinated by the history and theories of their own profession, which can become paralyzed by their own intellectual culture. Influenced by geometry, place, time and craft, and designing for durability, restraint, economy, and delight. We are focused on low budget, low maintenance, and ecologically responsible pragmatics. With all our projects, we are eager for the clients to continuously adjust, exploit, and curate their places after we have left. We expect our buildings to perform well in three criteria: practicality, ecologic, and creativity. Our buildings unite social relevance and personal involvement with innovative design approaches and highest aesthetic standards. Our firm aims towards appropriate designs of buildings that create special bond with place. We think architecture can be about the forensic notion of finding the evidence on site, avoiding the common temptation to develop a recognizable style. Instead, investigating ways to design appropriate responses to sites, clients, and context. We explore the creative opportunities for each project, influenced strongly by local and international design impulses, with the architecture's ultimate goal of providing commodity, firmness, and delight. It is an act of searching for a beauty of a new kind. We will be presenting our work in the form of a narration beginning from my earliest projects, which was a result of an alumni from the Bartlett School of Graduate Studies coming to Sri Lanka as a shelter coordinator of a tsunami schools rehabilitation project in eastern tsunami hit Sri Lanka. Our architecture practice encompasses two periods of significance of Sri Lankan history. A. The worst natural disaster Sri Lanka faced in living memory, the Boxing Day tsunami of December 2004, and the related post-disaster tsunami reconstruction work, which is at the beginning of my practice. B. 26 years Northeast War Sri Lanka faced from 1983 to 2009 and related post-war rebuilding effort in the north of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an architecture gold mine with ancient cities and monuments in north central province, the early colonial presence of the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the English, and the work of very good modernist architects such as Tisara Thanapati, Palinda Kannangara, and Vinod Jayasinghe. Projects we will be elaborating on are 1. Al Hussein School by the Lagoon, Ampara, Eastern Sri Lanka. 2. Community Center Talalla Matara, Southern Sri Lanka. Treetops Wildlife Bungalow, Southern Sri Lanka. German Tech North, Kilinochchi, Northern Sri Lanka. Kaitadi Vocational School, Jaffna, Northern Sri Lanka. Cement Brick House, Pagoda, Western Sri Lanka. CW Design Studio and Annex, Western Sri Lanka. As the first project, I would like to present a tsunami rehabilitation school in the Eastern Ampara district. And at the beginning, I like to quote from a newspaper article which was published after the project was completed and was handed over. The derelict shell of Al Hussein School stands like a monument overlooking the clear blue sea, its waters lapping gently on the white sandy beach. On Boxing Day 2004, primary school children sitting at their desks for holiday tuition were washed away by the force of a very different sea, when the Asian tsunami swept Sri Lanka. 58 girls and boys from the Al Hussein school were killed. Today, many of those pupils are buried a few steps away from their old school, under mounds of sand in a makeshift graveyard on the beach. Each grave is marked with a small wooden stake, flying a piece of white cotton, the color of sorrow in the Muslim faith. 2.5 years on, no one in the town of Saindamarithu needs a memorial to remember the devastation of that day. More than 3,500 men, women and children were killed in this area on the east coast of Sri Lanka. When international aid agencies rushed to Sri Lanka in the hours and days after the tsunami, few chose to tackle the worst affected eastern Ampara region, where more than 10,000 of the mixed Tamil and Muslim population died. It is a torturous 10-hour drive from the capital Colombo in the west to Ampara in the east, which has long been a battleground between the Tamil Tigers to the north and the Sri Lankan Army to the south. In 2005, when aid agencies were choosing where to base themselves, the breakdown of the peace agreement and the resurgence of the fighting meant the security of staff, supply routes, and workers could not be guaranteed. Yet some did come here, and after battling bureaucracy, corruption, and the fallout of the civil war, there are new signs of regeneration amidst the rubble. In a country that prides itself on offering free education for all, the emergence of a brand new Al Hussein school by the lagoon this month warranted the pomp of the 3-hour opening ceremony for local dignitaries, teachers, parents, and children. The three-story building, with its large classrooms, bright corridors, computer rooms, science labs, and library, stands 400 meters back from the sea to accommodate those children who are still too terrified to contemplate classes anywhere near the water. In the hours before the opening ceremony, the principal, Abdul Nasir, is overseeing the final touches. "This is a momentous day for us," he says. "The building is such high caliber. We have classrooms here that we never had before. These children are the future for Sri Lanka, and now we have a school which will help them find jobs, make the best of themselves, and achieve things." Al Hussein is one of the 62 schools serving 31,000 pupils in the war-ravaged east of Sri Lanka that have been rebuilt by the aid agency goal in what, by any reckoning, is a remarkably short period of 24 months. Each building was destroyed by the freak wave or severely damaged after being used to house some of the 1 million people who were displaced in the disaster. The agency is clear about why it chose to take on the school's program in the troubled East. Al Hussein is number 58 on the list of 62 schools that will be opened by the end of this month, before gold staff leave the country. Their job finished. Each was designed by a Sri Lankan architect and built to a modern specifications. For the first time in Sri Lanka, every school was equipped with computers, thanks to the $10 million budget for the project. At the lavish opening of Al Hussein School, Abdul Jabbar, who runs a charity for social change, reflects on the past 2.5 years. The tsunami was terrible for our country, but some good things, his school and the others that have been rebuilt, have come out of it, he says. And that is really wonderful to see. End of the quotes. Surviving students of the school was temporarily housed in makeshift tents built by the Goal Island Irish NGO along the banks of the lagoon, while reconstruction of the school was carried out in close proximity. In the eastern Ampara districts, minority Tamil and Muslim communities lived in mostly equal percentages to the majority Sinhalese community. Due to the pickle of this multi-ethnic and multi-religious composition, it was in the center of a storm of the war ravaging in the country at that time. Out of the 24 districts of the country, Ampara in the east was one of the most backward, poverty-stricken and downtrodden districts of Sri Lanka compared with other districts. Most of the surviving students come to school barefoot. due to the poverty engulfing the society, suffering from a long-lasting war and natural disasters. Free education was one of the tools used to empower these sections of the society. As the land allocated to reconstruct the school was a reclaimed stretch of land, reclaimed along the Karachitona Lagoon, a thorough soil investigation was carried out as an initial step to identify the bearing capacity of the soil. As almost all students have gone through the terrifying experience of facing the tsunami and surviving, almost all of them were heavily traumatized. Task at hand to the architects was providing a sense of security to the school building, to the students who were severely traumatized and afraid to attend school lying close to a body of water. As a solution, the cross-section of the school was designed using a step-back section, with each floor slipping back by 5 feet, so that the whole school be visible from every nook and corner, that the students feel secure due to the togetherness created by this. This unique cross-back section of the building, cantilevering to the rear roadside, created a triple height veranda corridor on lagoon side and a double height passage at the rear roadside, which was used as a pebble court play area for the school children. The single monopitched overpowering roof encompassing all 3 levels of the school, creating a triple height corridor veranda on lagoon double height passage at the rear roadside. The 25 feet by 20 feet classroom blocks were arranged parallel to the lagoon, generating narrow linear thin section, encouraging cross-ventilation. The reservation on the lagoon side and the road reservation on the road side left only a narrow stretch of land to build. Above restriction was taken as an advantage, and a one classroom deep thin building, encouraging through drafts with maximum cross ventilation was designed. Due to the poor maintenance of public schools in the state sector, materials used were carefully selected so that they were long-lasting materials with low maintenance. Example in point was the selection of cost-effective cement-based paints selected as paints opposed to comparatively expensive emulsion paint. Building was designed without gutters and rainwater downpipes, as maintenance of these items are almost non-existent in public schools, resulting in block gutters serving as breeding grounds for dengue mosquitoes. The whole building plinth was raised by 1 meter above existing ground level to withstand a future flood from the lagoon. This raised plinth of the veranda corridor on lagoon side was tiered so that school children can sit overlooking the playground, which was located between the lagoon and the school building. As our next project, they are going to present another tsunami project. Rebuilding in Sri Lanka had a long way to go after the catastrophic damage wrought by the 2004 tsunami. This new community center, designed by our practice on a budget of $55,000, work hard to restore essential services for the villagers of Talalla. International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, as their tsunami rehabilitation support closeout program, invited the architects to design and supervise a community center building for the tsunami-affected community of Talalla, Matara, in southern Sri Lanka. Total budget allocation was Sri Lankan rupees 6 million, and the community shelter building was to be built in a Buddhist temple premises as a token of gratitude to the chief monk of the temple, who helped tsunami-affected Talalla villagers in numerous ways by providing food and accommodation. Rebuilding in Sri Lanka still had a long way to go after the catastrophic damage wrought by the 2004 tsunami. This new community center, on a budget of $55,000, works hard to restore essential services for the villagers of Talalla. Set in the grounds of Buddhist temple, the center adopts the ancient Buddhist temple building tradition of Tampita Viharas so that it can withstand flooding. As the community center was located in a temple, it was decided to raise the building above the ground in the ancient Buddhist building tradition of Tampita Viharas. Raised floor of the community center was a suspended concrete slab out of precast in situ reinforced concrete, column and beam structural skeleton. Chief monk of the temple was initially reluctant to donate temple land for a single-story building due to the scarcity of vacant temple land. To solve the above problem, the architects had to come up with a design proposal where a future expansion in terms of a timber deck mezzanine floor can be carried out at a later stage, after completion of the construction of the community center as a first phase. Thus, the resultant cathedral-like double-height volume in the community center, due to its 45-degree steeply sloping roof angle, leaving ample space for a future expansion vertically. Due to budget constraints, walls were left exposed brickwork without plaster and concrete columns, and beams, including roof beams, were left raw concrete to increase the textured, tactile quality of the community center. Roof was also left ceilingless as a value engineering exercise, letting the possibility for the roof to breathe. The steeply sloping roof was constructed out of exposed colored timber rafters in a clay tile roof cover. As a counterpoint to the otherwise somber surroundings, splashes of color were introduced by way of cheerfully colored doors to the interior of the building. Facilities in the community center include a reading room, a library, male and female toilets, and a common hall for meetings. It serves as a Buddhist religious school on Sundays, in addition to being a preaching hall on Buddhist religious full moon Poya holidays. With the above multi-purpose flexibility of the community center building, it was expected to serve wider variety of public in various ways in this region of tsunami-hit southern Sri Lanka. The chief monk of the temple was magnanimous enough to provide cooked meals in addition to the free accommodation provided, including sanitary facilities to the tsunami refugees. They were housed in the temple for over 3 months, with the chief monk spearheading a generous relief effort. As a gesture of goodwill to the chief monk for the services rendered during this difficult time, aid organization Red Cross decided to give the temple a community center in recognition of the services rendered during that time. Whereas spatial value has been more commonly understood to be derived from the light and its revealing tactile quality, the design exploration of the community center, having prioritized the details of function equally with that of space making, have found subtler working details to contribute as much as and possibly more to perceived spatial quality. The community center is a project laced with details testing rawness, unrefinement, and unfinished. Lessons learned from the project widened and reinforced our growing understanding of how materials give texture and age gracefully in monsoon Asia. The center became a careful balance of clay bricks, timber windows, clay roof tiles, concrete, and age. With all the requirements of natural ventilation, functionality, and construction economy in mind, the community center was designed to be predominantly self-maintaining and aesthetically elegant as it weathered the grace of tropical humidity. It was the first of its type which formally began to maximize the trades and the materials of a local building industry, minimizing cost, in its methods beginning to show consistency with the philosophical leanings of texture through economy. This small community center aspires to fulfill a need to provide space for community activities within the village that was affected by the tsunami. The building is used for numerous activities such as religious instruction and community meeting. It is placed within the premises of the temple adjacent to the Bodhi tree. The concrete frame structure celebrates clear modernist references and visually dominates the aesthetic of the building with exposed brick wall panels and traditional timber and terracotta roof tiles. Palette of materials used is very simple, but stand out amid the line wash buildings in the temple complex. Carefully detailed glazed window shutters, where such was needed, are designed to function without frames, and use of simple screens of vertical timber members under the eaves show concern for the frugal use of material, while they bring in very good quality of light and ventilation into the space. As the next project, we'd like to present Treetops Wildlife Bungalow Kirinda in the deep south of Sri Lanka. Treetops is a materialization of a wildlife lover's dream, a pavilion in a semi-wilderness that offers more than enough space for small groups of wildlife enthusiasts to stay, involving the landscape in an ongoing reciprocal relationship with inhabitation. Conceived as a pavilion in the semi-wilderness, the bungalow is positioned between the forest to the east and the rice fields to the west. The living spaces open to the breeze and are protected from the sun and rain by a large overhanging roof. Working with a relatively open site and the fact that one boundary is shared with a buffer zone of a national park, the design has to take a very sensitive approach. In order to obtain relevant planning permits, the project had to be well adjusted to suit the terrain, but both in terms of shape and scale. Located at the end of the paddy fields, the bungalow is an object in the landscape, perched on the edge. It rises over the landscape and looks over the semi-wilderness, providing breathtaking views of the paddy fields and Nimalava Sanctuary. It is landscaped with natural grass that captures the patterns of the wind. Treetops draw inspiration from its magnificent location and the wildlife bungalows inside the Yala National Park, run by the Sri Lanka Wildlife Department. Simple permeable volumes that open, capturing distant views of tropical forests. Built over 2 levels, the design intends to highlight the relationship between the interior and exterior environment and capture the serenity of the natural surroundings, emphasizing the importance of being connected with the Yala Park's jungle environment was a key intent of the design. Balcony terraces are fluid extensions of internal spaces, capturing cooling breezes and allowing cross-ventilation. Bedroom windows frame magnificent views of the paddy fields and distant jungles. The architecture is not a slave to a theoretical stylistic demand. It is a slave to the view and the desire for uninterrupted views. The architecture of the 2 longitudinal volumes helps to emphasize the surrounding nature in all its glory and makes it appear less solid and dominating and therefore more dynamic. The main living areas are located in the lower levels with bedrooms strategically positioned in the upper levels for privacy. The layering of this house permits different experiences in different spaces. A key strategy to create a generous level of principal living room was to elevate the ground level on a plinth. The design has been very carefully considered with all seating elements and living areas orientated to enjoy the view. The columns have also been carefully placed to interrupt the views of the semi-wilderness as little as possible. The large ground floor pavilion spaces emphasize the magnetism of the site and its ever-present backdrop. The large openings on both sides of living dining areas allow a pleasant draft, provide passive cooling, and some relief from the hot tropical sun. This generously proportioned open undercover living area is shaded throughout the day, ideal for escaping the heat, while being closer to the natural vegetation. Thin columns replace the bearing walls and allow for an open plan arrangement. This has the advantage of opening the bungalow out to the leaves, so that regardless of where one is in the bungalow, there are as few barriers as possible between the inside and the surroundings. Inside the upper floor dormitory bedrooms, large floor-to-ceiling windows make one feel the space larger than it is, a feeling that is emphasized by the panoramic views. Every aspect of the design is developed with the view and the site in mind. Windows not only offer view, they also provide comfort. First floor cantilever concept was used to protect the building from the hot sun. Generous overhangs offer protection from Kirinda's harsh climate while providing the bungalow with its unique aesthetic. A spacious second floor roof terrace allows for a 360-degree view of the surrounding vegetation, a rooftop garden with potted trees. Every material was chosen with careful consideration of the colors and textures found in the environment. Natural materials are often used and seek to establish a connection between the inhabitants and their surroundings. They also help embed the building into the context without spoiling the natural beauty of the site. Concrete slabs, masonry walls, wood for framing are used to construct the buildings, while walls are stained in cement plaster. Basic concrete structure supports a single roof plane. Masonry walls, glass, wood form the enclosure of the bungalow. Openable facades adjust to changing weather conditions, framing views of the surrounding garden and distant jungles. Materials used such as stone plinths, wood cladding, or natural stone facing in the plinth are also help to accentuate the bungalow. The color of the timber cladding harmonizes with the surroundings, giving the volume a more natural appearance. Inside, the emphasis on interior design is on elegance, with wood combined with cement walls and limited ornamentation. Number of furnishings has to be kept to a minimum, which emphasizes the sense of space. On the sanctuary side, which is well protected from the weather due to generous eaves, predominantly teak siding was used to give warmth. Natural stone and timber provide natural balance. Material selection removes the need for ongoing maintenance, staying resilient to the extreme weather conditions of the tropics and avoid regular repair and replacement, maximizing the building's lifespan. Inside, the palette comprises largely gray and natural tones. Those create a strong contrast to the lush green foliage surrounding the bungalow and add to the natural feel of the design. The open plan arrangement also gives a sense of infinite space, with all rooms offering views from over the semi-wilderness. Material and finishes were kept to a bare minimum, so as not to create a sense of excess. Inside, simple furnishings reflect the purpose of the space. This is a wildlife bungalow where one should spend time outdoors, enjoy the paddy fields and the jungle whenever possible. The bungalow reinforces the concept of a bungalow as only a small part of a greater landscape. Its design is an investigation of how idealized conception of a wildlife bungalow is transformed by its context and form. It requires maximum flexibility as a residence that could accommodate varying sleeping needs, anything from guest couples to burgeoning family groups on holiday, and the layout successfully resolves that challenge. Treetops Wildlife Bungalow is a work of man built to protect the inhabitants from the forces of nature and transforming the surrounding nature into a never-ending panorama. Design is notable for the careful consideration of the environment. The bungalow emphasizes rather than detracts from the raw beauty of the site. The materials used respond to the surrounding. As the next project, we would like to present a post-war rehabilitation reconstruction project in the north of Sri Lanka, called German Tech Kilinochi. German Tech Kilinochi was meant to be the German Tech North, the second German Tech in Sri Lanka after the highly successful vocational training provider Ceylon German Training Institute, Rakmalana in Western Sri Lanka. It was expected to follow in the footsteps of its highly successful sister organization and follow the same German tech brand, synonymous with providing successful technical training for thousands of skilled workers in Sri Lanka over the years. That the site was arranged to form three zones: administration zone, vocational zone, and residential zone. Admin building is located in the first one-third of the land, before the enlarged water retainer canal pond, while second one-third was laid out with a group of vocational educational buildings, facing a central landscaped common green area in the middle. The third one-third of the land is allocated for residential facilities and canteen. Canteen is one of the two bubble-story buildings in the complex, the other being the admin and auditorium building, located on the main central axis of the compound. These two double-story buildings visually anchor the occasional and residential areas to the central axis of the complex, which is positioned as a landscape green area for common gatherings. Additionally, admin building is purposefully orientated and planned to signify the sense of entry to the SLGTI premises through an entrance arch formed by the building itself. Orientation of all buildings, their architecture, and the material used are directly determined by the physical conditions and context of the northern province and the functions of the complex itself. Use of rugged materials as zinc aluminum sandwich panel roofing sheets, exposed clay bricks, exposed concrete finishes, and long horizontal building forms follow the function of a technical training school, as well as it mimics the vast open flat terrain and low-lying buildings of the northern province of Sri Lanka. Vocational buildings are constructed out of exposed fire-cut brickwork and exposed concrete structures to promote a robust outlook to depict its functions as well as for less maintenance. The windows are shaded by cantilevering concrete sunshades, and set of concrete louvers are placed in between the canopies and the roof to allow heated air to escape through the building to cut down heat trapping within. Both vocational and hostel blocks are formed in U-shape stand form with a central courtyard wrapped around by one-room thickness buildings to facilitate optimum cross-ventilation and allow ample natural light to the interiors. Windows positioned on either end of this thin section use black powder-coated aluminium sashed top-hung glazed windows, providing contrast to the otherwise natural background. Out of the U-block, one wing is laid out with classrooms for theoretical training and the other wing with workshops for practical training. Classrooms and workshops are separated from each other by the courtyard in the middle to prevent noise pollution from workshops affecting classrooms. Canteen buildings depicts much relaxed and casual expression with its open areas and butterfly roof, giving a futuristic twist to the German tech north. All gently sloping monopitch sandwich panel roofs are orientated to obtain maximum sunlight for the solar panels as well as to cut down glare within, blocking natural light into the buildings. The extended eaves serve this purpose well, apart from protecting the buildings from heavy monsoonal rains which fall during the last 3 months of the year. Seasonal dry canal occurring in the first one-third of the land was enlarged, forming turfed embankments on either side using backfill soil. It resulted in a landscape feature and a water retention pond with a spillway retaining a water body of 600 millimeters in the dry landscape. The vocational training offered to youth at this institute will encourage them to gain technical and vocational skills and a high degree of proficiency in their chosen vocational trades, with the understanding that they are a vital moving force of the future economic development of the northern region of the country. As the next project, it is the extension of the vocational training in the north of Sri Lanka. We would like to present the Kaitadi Vocational School in Jaffna. Jaffna Peninsula was under the control of Sri Lanka government troops from 1996 during the 3 decades-old war, but it was an isolated city due to the absence of a land supply route, supply only by sea and air. Result was a city living in a time capsule, isolated from the rest of the country. As a result, buildings in Jaffna Peninsula were in a highly dilapidated condition, even after the end of the war, with no repairs carried out for decades. This applied to the recently commenced vocational training center in Kaitari, Jaffna, on a donated residential premises, just 6 kilometers south of Jaffna city center on the A9 Kandy Jaffna road. Almost 100 students were studying in highly dilapidated, decades-old residential buildings, not built for vocational educational purposes, with decaying timber-structured clay tile roofs about to collapse. Under the German government-funded vocational training in the North project, it was decided to demolish the decaying buildings and reconstruct new buildings with much suited to vocational education purposes, relocating students temporarily. The resultant new vocational training center, built with robust materials, were meant to empower the students in their search for vocational skills. It was also expected to fill in as a vocational training provider in the war-torn northern province, satisfying a vital need of a society lacking vocational skills after a 3 decades-old war. In turn, help students to move up in the social ladder through vocational education, gain self-confidence, empowerment, and achieve much-needed job security and economic stability in the economically resilient northern province. A place which can be looked up to with respect for creating a better and strong generation of skilled Sri Lankans. The vocational training offered to youth at this institute will encourage them to gain technical and vocational skills and high degree of proficiency in their chosen vocational trades, with the understanding that they are a vital moving force of the future economic development of the northern region. PTA Kaitadi encompasses founding ethos of imparting employable skills that will encourage entrepreneurial ventures and equip young people in the war-torn north with competencies and abilities, leading to empowerment that will induce economic development of the region in general. The architectural objective of the project was to build a robust training center which can withstand years of wear and tear in the extreme weather conditions of the Jaffna Peninsula, as well as to represent the function of a training school. Selection of materials were primarily based on above requirement and resulted in the use of sturdy and heavy-duty materials, such as cement bricks for walls, insulation panels for roof, and black powder-coated aluminium doors and windows, which contributed to the monochrome, textured, black and white industrial aesthetic of the finished training center. The layout takes on a U shape with two new buildings being connected by the existing double-story main building, thus creating an open-ended courtyard facing the lagoon, which draws in the much-needed winds from the lagoon into the buildings. Also, the layout is laid out to give prominence to the existing main building, making it the main axis and the binding element of the whole complex, as a respectful reminder to its past service to the VTA. This open-ended courtyard was paved with interlocking cement paving blocks, creating a place for interaction for students and enhancing the monochrome, textured, tactile quality of the common space. Courtyard also retains two old trees, providing the required softness to the otherwise rigid and robust built environment, as well as desired shelter from the harsh sun. Existing ground rail in the middle of the courtyard was saved, considering the scarcity of water in the Jaffna Peninsula. A tiered stepped concrete open-to-sky pavilion for students' morning assembly overlooking this courtyard was created for sense of enclosure of the courtyard space, to be roofed at a later stage by a lean-to roof in the second phase of the project. Insulation panels for roofing were selected to replace the clay tile roof in the existing two-story section building on a steel structural skeletal framework, replacing the decaying timber roof structure. Black powder-coated aluminium door windows were selected to replace the existing decaying timber door windows in the main two-storied building. This vocational training center has been built to replace the facility that existed in the site on a group of residential buildings donated for the cause by a well-wisher. The design chose to renovate and conserve the two-story building on the site, and a new U-shaped structure centered on this old building with large open workshop spaces were added. As the next project, we would like to present a residential project, Pagoda House, Nugegoda, using cement bricks. The site was as typical as suburbia could get, a street with a rhythm of roof tile plastered brick boxes, built to the limit of the road setbacks. Site is bounded by existing houses on two sides, with a main neighborhood street on east side. The density and potential proximity of neighboring houses was an issue to address. In a neighborhood of older detached houses, ranging from 1 to 2 stories, the narrative of the house began as a shell for a tall living room. Pagoda House wraps its transparent inner spaces with a shell of unplastered cement brick set into the frame of a raw concrete structure. The rear of the house contains the living dining room and kitchen on the ground floor, with bedrooms above. The living dining areas look into the rear garden from the west, with the guest room on the opposite side. This house is an attempt to construct a house using cement bricks, a material newly introduced to Sri Lankan market, which was expected to give a unique character to the house as a counterpoint to otherwise differently colored houses lining the neighborhood. It was intended to be a discrete, invisible house with a neutral background. The use of mono-pitch single sloping aluminium roof followed the road contours. Employment of double height space in the living room was meant to visually and physically link the two levels of this small house. Planting of 8 numbers root ball replanted fruit-bearing trees in both front and rear gardens of the house was meant to induce urban wildlife into the surrounding of the house in an otherwise high-density Colombo suburb of Nugegoda. Use of cantilevered staircase under which a visitor to the house accessed the main door, and the use of triangular cantilevered glass windows mimicking the trapezium-shaped land shape are special features of the house. Incorporation of cantilevering windows have been given a certain machine-like exterior appearance to the house. Material selection is based on the lower cost of materials, much less in the way of products specifically manufactured to resist change and wear than those which evolve best with weather and through time, finding new life in the manner of their assembly within the less than perfect construction culture which typifies Sri Lanka. In retrospect, the simple cement brick wall formed a basic part of the glue concerning architectural economy as a philosophical basis. What made it so relevant with its application, however, was its ability to age well. Aluminium, glass, concrete, and cement bricks form the palette of finishes intended to bring that tactile quality to a freshly built house. Cement brick selection and editing of details do affect conceptual continuity and aesthetic cohesion to some degree of cost consciousness. The need for construction simplicity and the power of export cement bricks with tight budgets began the narrative of architectural economy. In summary, Pagoda House is designed as an environment of basic solids and voids, given form through controlled assembly of cement bricks, concrete, aluminium, and glass. As a final project, I come to my own design studio. CWA Design Studio is inspired on the concepts of incompleteness and shock contrast and relies on the paradigm of textural contrast. The contrast of the entire studio of cement bricks with the crispness of glass, aluminium frames, timber frames, and cleanly painted ceiling. The studio attempts a design of cross-ventilation and natural lit space in a residential context, and the maximization of usable area for added value. So the kind of rawness which was envisioned, the principles of detailed management became a challenge, a simple and effective way of maintaining construction economy. The structural order of the annex was designed to serve the purpose of finish with its enclosure, the result of balance found through tonal homogeneity. The idea of a building's envelope being captured as part of its architecture had always felt more relevant from the view of construction economy and the final aesthetics, and it was carried out to a reasonable effect. The narrative made distinction between the textural and spatial qualities of each natural or constructed element in context. This complexity engages in the intelligent search for greater economy of means, a part of the entire process, which as the product of work develop its under-constructed and less polished sense of finish. The thinking and making of architecture, as it engages the specific context of its location, are the formal elements of inquiry with regard to this studio. Specific context also applies to the way any one country or construction region most commonly works and builds, about which materials and processes have best adapted functionally and economically over time in each of their respective locations. For the diligent architect, context will include budget constraints and relevance of use. CWO Studio is also about how specificity of place can guide the processes and subsequent form of relevant design. The house is intended to age with time and to receive the color and life of dwelling within, its architecture hidden for the most part by the foliage of its first room, the front garden. Their spatial values has been more commonly understood to be derived from the light and its revealing of tactile quality. The design exploration of the CWA studio have prioritized the details of function equally with that of space making, have found subtler working details to contribute as much as, and possibly more, to the perceived spatial quality. CW Design Studio is a project laced with details testing rawness, unrefinement, and the unfinished. Lessons learned from this project widened and reinforced our growing understanding of how materials give texture and age gracefully in monsoon Asia. And we come to the final slide. Hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an insightful presentation. I mean, I'm sure that we have learned a lot from starting from post-tsunami construction to a varied of projects from your first-hand experience. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Vibhuti Sachdev to join the conversation.
Thank you so much for that very interesting range of projects, and I'm sure the students would have engaged. What struck me was the aesthetic that actually combines or sort of goes across the projects, be it institutional, residential. So there is a very strong aesthetics of exposed concrete, exposed cement, exposed wood, exposed, and sort of minimizing the layers of material. My question was, how easy or hard is it to kind of work with that very strong aesthetic? Do you find that there are occasions when you've had to work with a different aesthetic in terms of what the client wants and what you want, and what are the ways in which you kind of have very well succeeded in sticking to your ideology and philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, for example, the cement brick house that the penultimate project that I showed, depends on the client's input as well. We used exposed GI conduiting, where the conduiting because we are using exposed cement bricks in the inside and outside both. We had to we couldn't do the conduiting inside. It was difficult, and the client accepted that fact. But then I didn't. It is not in this presentation that I'm doing another house, similar house with exposed clay bricks. But because of this problem, we had to agree to plaster and paint the inside of the house. So it's a kind of you have to compromise in some cases, but try to do as much as possible. I mean, the fact that you said we're trying to minimize the use of materials. I mean, adding plaster and paint on top of that will kind of it is environmentally also not good. And then I think the textured look gives a textured tactile quality to a kind of a character to a building.
And so you find that it is, the job of the architect to kind of, so to speak, within quotes, educate the client and the client to be receptive to your ideas? Or do you think that they just, when signing you up, they kind of give you, the freedom to? I mean, how much of your time do you have to spend educating the clients? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, of course, the clients come to me. They know I use these cost-effective construction methods, and because of their low budgets, they come. But then they have their demands as well. For example, the project that I mentioned, the client's wife had an asthma condition, so she was not keen on the exposed brick on the inside because of dust and collecting and all that. So in some cases, I mean, these are practical issues that I had to agree. So it's actually depending on the relationship between the client and the architect. And the best work comes out when the architect and the client is in the same wavelength, kind of. Yeah, but in some cases, yeah, you have to give in as well.
So of late, I've been thinking, how to bring in that factor of the client in the studio, because our students, are educated in a almost an idealistic situation where the client is always silent and has unlimited money, and is always nodding at the student's design, and not kind of saying, "Ye mujhe pasand nahi hai, there's too much dust, I hate this." So there's no that kind of voice which they will from day one when they graduate as architects, they will have to confront and negotiate with. So how do you get that factor of negotiating your design with somebody who may not actually like what you're doing, and how do you bring it into the education? The other Chinthaka, I wanted to ask you whether you face this situation in Sri Lanka as well, where we face it here, and I'm sure in many other countries, where the mainstream aesthetics is very different from the architect's aesthetics. So in a way, it makes us very elitist in our approach. It makes us always say, these people don't have any taste. And this is really apparent when we look at our heritage sites as well. You can find a 13th century footing structure which is covered with bathroom tiles in the interior, and any of us will go and hold our heads and say, "Ye kya kar diya? What have you done?" And and you find an opposing view with the people who are stakeholders, communities, who would say, "Actually, this is looking very nice. It's bright and shiny. I don't know what your problem is." You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how, so the mainstream aesthetics is, are we ahead or behind, or how do you how do you position yourself with, the, so to speak, the layman or the non-architects, or, do you find that elitism of aesthetics also there in Sri Lanka, or is it not so prominent?
Yeah, to a certain extent, yes, because you mentioned the term taste. For example, if you look at Sri Lankan towns, they are like dominated by mainly name boards. Like each name board of the shop is shouting harder to get attention, and the aesthetic is completely dominated. I think. If you look at that kind of a scenario, some kind of a regulation need to be applied into cityscapes in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka especially, because none of the cities are identifiable by their character or the location or anything. Every city looks the same, and that kind of situation. So we need to bring in kind of urban design guidelines where all these signages and the front appearances have to be kind of restricted, the use of lettering and all that. That's one thing I believe, but I don't know whether it can be kind of implementable. And also this issue of heritage sites being especially with our Buddhist culture, the heritage buildings are in hands of mostly Buddhist monks, and their tendency is to get donations from philanthropists and then try to kind of upgrade these with flashy tiles and as you mentioned. So now, of course, luckily we have this archaeological department has been strict, and they have kind of the listed buildings. They don't allow the monks to do any refurbishments without the archaeology department involvement. So that kind of a regulatory approach is one thing that I was thinking of how to kind of solve that problem. Of course, generally, the general public, where most of them don't have access to the architects, and they build their own houses. That is anyway the most commonly thing in South Asia, maybe in the world. So that, of course, is kind of we need to give knowledge to them and kind of then direct them in such a way that they kind of understand what architecture really is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Aurelia.
Yes, so thank you so much, sir. With this, we come to an end for our session 2. And I think that we have learned a lot, and we have a lot of questions regarding this, which will be addressed in the next session. Srijini ma'am, if we can stop the